Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. I've got no rhythm. And today I'm going to do another tag because I was in a sort of taggy mood. And this is the finished book tag, which is at least 4 years old. I found a version that Steve Donoghue did 4 years ago, where he credited a channel called Headless Books, which no longer seems to be active or even exist, as the originator of the tag. And then I think Criminoli was one of the people who did it recently, so it's all serviced again. And I think I've answered some of these questions before, but they're kind of fun. So here we go. Question 1: do you keep a list of all the books that you have read? I do. I keep it in Goodreads. Started using Goodreads properly sort of 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that, where I actually did a project where I went through and entered every single book in my library into my library on Goodreads. They had a really cool scanning function on the mobile Goodreads app, so you could just hold it up against the barcode on the back of your book and then upload it. So I would take a shelf down at a time and go through literally one by one and scan them with my phone and put them all in there, because I just wanted an online record of where I was. And I kind of use it's like it's a great reference point when I'm out hunting for books. And for example, I read a bunch of different series of books where the titles are kind of irrelevant, but are not clear where in the series you are. And I just need a reminder. If I'm out there, I see one. Where is this? Is this in the next 3 or 4 that I need in a series, Agatha Christie or something? And if so, I might pick it up because I know I'm going to get to it soon. Or if I want specifically the next. Anyway, so Goodreads is great for that I can see the titles of the books that I've read, and it's just a sort of handy repository of reading. One of the flip sides of starting to use Goodreads, or one of the benefits or disadvantages, depending on your point of view, of starting to use Goodreads regularly, was I started the Goodreads reading challenge, which was just a way. People always ask me, I was thought of a reader. I keep a lot of books, so it looks like I'm a reader, even though there are people who read just as much and more than me who just don't keep all their books. But I'm surrounded by books, so people ask me questions about my reading, and they would always say, "How much do you read?" And I had I wasn't sure. I've for the last 20 years at least, I've always had a book on the go. So I'm never without a book. It's never like, I finished something, I'm not reading anything at the moment, I'll wait until I get to the book. I always kept a relatively accessible TBR, physical TBR, because I'm in Israel, and always had books, always had something on the go. But I wasn't quite sure. I figured I read on average about a book a week, and I started doing the Goodreads reading challenge, and I would mark it as 52 books for the year. And it's just a way of me tracking it. The net effect of that was, or the gamification meant, that I significantly, and this is even before BookTube, I significantly upped my reading rate. Not because I felt this number was taunting me, just because of, okay. I think in the first year that I started tracking, I got to 40 books, I think 60 books, and then very significantly started reading a lot more. And now I do, the last couple of years, I've done about 3 times that amount. I just under 3 times, so it's roughly sort of 2 to 2.8 books a week, if that makes sense. And I kind of enjoy tracking that. I'm not looking, the only. So the next question is, what stats do you record? Nothing else beyond that. I mark the book on Goodreads only when I finished reading it, and at the end of the year, I like to look at my year in reading and see how many pages that actually covers. And that's an average, because remember, I read a lot of graphic novels, which tend to be can either be like 96 or 120, 140 pages tops. There are some bigger ones, of course, but I read and I read short novels, and then several times a year I'll read something 600, 700, 800 pages plus, whether it's a trollop or a big read of some kind. So the average pages per book isn't super interesting, but the number of pages over a year is kind of interesting to me. Just comparing it now, I can go back and compare it over the last 6 or 7 years. That's sort of as geeky as I get. I'm not really interested in recording how many female writers, how many women writers, how many men writers, how many gay writers, how many writers of color. I don't want to know those stats, and I don't look at them, and I don't still record them, but I do go back and look at the books that I've read. I look at my TBR, and I'm trying to read diversely. because I think that's good for me, not because I want to perform that necessarily. Trying not to, but I think it's good for my interactions with the world to read, to read diversely. And I try to do that without being prescriptive about it, if that makes sense. I probably should read more works in translation. I probably should read more works by name a category. I'm trying to keep my reading fun without being exclusive or down one path. I limit myself to 3 or 4 genres, not like Steve Donohue's fabled 16 genres that he reads exhaustively. I'm really reading sort of some literary fiction, some graphic novels, some crime fiction, there's a bit of spy fiction, crime thriller, spies, and some classics, although probably only down to about 3 or 4 of those a year. So I know I could read even more diversely, and that is something I try to do, but I'm not going to make stats about it or get prescriptive. Do you give star ratings? Yes, only because sort of Goodreads asks you to. So I'm a rule follower. You put in your thing and it says star ratings, I give it star rating, but my star ratings are kind of meaningless. Tends to be sort of 4 stars for everything, a rare 5-star, and even rarer 1-star. It's 2 and 3 is unlikely, but I give it a handful there. But the majority of my things, if a book has either really satisfied me or has done what it set out to do, so perhaps I didn't kind of get on with, I can see this is a it's probably going to get 4 stars. I don't know why it's not. I say my star rating is nothing that anyone should look at and say, oh, Daniel gave this X stars. Oh, that means we should think this about it. No. Do you review your books? Yes. So one of the things I started doing, again, this is once I got once I started properly using Goodreads, and I mean properly in that in order to be proper, one should use it. I mean, I started recording every time I finish a book. I mention it I put it into my Goodreads. I decided also that it was just, for me, a mechanism where I could just sit with that book for 5 minutes and write a review. And I write maybe 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, tops, sometimes 1 line, 1 sentence. But I don't know whether you would call that a review, but that's all for me. And I'm the only one who goes back and reads it. No one else has to read it. I don't have a huge following on Goodreads. It's purely for me. It's my stamp and things. I go back, oh, what do I think of this one? I often forget. So when I go back and read, my instant reaction after a book may be different to how I feel about it afterwards. I said before, I've used this term, I'm a holistic reader. So I tend to remember books as a whole rather than the bon mot here or the joke there or the twist there. Maybe I'll remember a twist. And so having these sort of very specific little references that I made at the time is kind of fun for me. But again, it's not because I think anyone would get any value from reading them or from knowing my opinion. It's purely for me. Where do you put your finished books? Take a wild guess. I keep everything I've read, and it gets filed behind me in this giant end-to-end bookshelves that we had built 2 or 3 years ago. So this is all fiction and non-fiction mixed together. The height of these shelves, apart from the top one, which goes all the way up, is exactly the height of a standard hardback book, and it's standard in US and UK, which is the majority of places the books I read are published. So not good for graphic novels, which are slightly taller than a hardback. And so all the graphic novels are in the room at the end, which was my son's room before he got married and left home. So there's a couple of old Billy bookshelves in there. I'm sure I've shown them at some point. And one bookshelf in particular, dedicated floor to ceiling, well, not all the way to the ceiling, is full of graphic novels. And then there's another one to the side of that where my TBR. So I never understand this. This is something I've seen people do. They buy books and they shelve them. And then when they go to choose another book, they just pick it down off the shelves. No, the only thing that gets properly shelved and alphabetized are books that I've read. My books to be read are in a separate place. I take them from there, I read them, and then they get shelved. How do you pick your next book? I think I'm kind of a mood reader. Again, I think it's something we've the term that I've learned from Goodreads, but it tends to follow some kind of theme. So If I read a hard novel, I'll try and read something light afterwards. Often a graphic novel, because I've been buying a lot of those recently. But there was a time where I wasn't reading as many before I discovered eBay and the ability to buy graphic novels £3-4 at a time each. But I tend to like to break things up. So it used to be, before I was reading a lot of graphic novels, I would read literary fiction and then crime fiction, and then literary fiction, crime fiction, classic, and so I rarely I will read two literary books or difficult books back to back, because for me reading is very much about momentum. If I get bogged down in a book for a long time, as I have done, things that I've really enjoyed and things that I haven't enjoyed. So the Ducks Newburyport took me a month to get through, and it was a slog every step, whereas I'll read a trollop over a couple of weeks, and I'm happy to spend time in that world. 900 pages. I read Suitable Boy back in the day, 29 years ago, and I know that because I read it before my son was born, and it's 1,400 pages, and I read 100 pages a day. Like, I set myself a schedule, read it over 2 weeks, and then it was time. I happened to be going on holiday the day after I finished it, and so I got some light reading done. I think I read on that trip Carrie Fisher's Postcards from the Edge, for example. So that's a contrast, I guess, between The Suitable Boy, big, heavy, but delightful, but chunky novel, and then something light and breezy afterwards. So I tend to break it up that way. That's how I choose my next book. If I read something challenging, difficult, whatever those things may mean to me, as opposed to a definition of that book, then I'll try to read something that's breezy and light afterwards. Do you have any rituals when you finish the book? Kind of, and some people question what those rituals, what possible rituals people could have, but I do have a kind of ritual. So as soon as I finish a book, as I finish the last page of a book, I go and immediately pick up the book I'm going to start next, whatever time of day or night it is. And if I finish a book at 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe my wife's next to me in bed, maybe I won't get out of bed and go and get another book, but I have done that. But usually I will go straight away, take my bookmark out of the book that I finished, and read the first page, the first chapter, something of the next book, so that there is an instant. I go from one to another. I try not to leave a week between one book and another. I've always got the bookmark sits in the next book immediately, even if I've only read the first page or I've read the intro or whatever it is. Because as a monogamous reader, I have one bookmark which I transfer from book to book. And these are bookmarks that were very kindly made by a friend of mine, Lynn, who made me 5 of these for my 50th birthday. This, I believe, is the second of the 5. So I think that summer that I turned 50, I went away to the States with the first of the bookmarks, and I lost it when I was in Connecticut, I believe. So this is the second one. I think my daughter gave one of my 50th birthday bookmarks away to one of her friends who needed a bookmark, and I have 2 remaining, which will only come into use when this one, which is a bit beaten up and is being used for the last 3 years mostly, when that dies, I have 2 more here, which hopefully will last me until I turn 60. And then this was a lovely surprise that Lynn made me. I will ask her for more and retire all of these, whether they've been used or not. I think that's something to aim for if I'm still around. So my ritual, I finish a book, I immediately put the bookmark in a new book. I take the books themselves and I put them over by the window, because I don't shelve them until I've spoken about them on BookTube. That's like a relatively recent ritual. So I've been doing this for the last 2.5 years. So once I have done a review of them and held them up for the picture that goes in the, what do you call that, thumbnail. Once I've taken the picture of the thumbnail with the book, then it gets shelved in alphabetical order. Those are my rituals. This is way too long for a simple tag, but you asked. Bye.